Hello and welcome to CharitEpulse, your regular update on news and happenings in the charity sector, and the podcast where purpose meets personality. I'm James Saunders, I'm a partner at Moore Kingston Smith, and I'm joined as ever by my co-hosts, Catherine Russ-Jomji, partner and head of charities at Shakespeare Martineau, and Charles Mesquita, charities director at Quilter Cheviot. We're going to dive into the heart of the charity sector, unpack those big issues, spotlight any unsung heroes that we can see, and share the stories that matter to you. You may be listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, YouTube, any of our respective organisations' websites. However you're listening, you're very welcome, but please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, generally hit any positive feedback button you can for us, assuming, of course, you find our little sessions useful. It's nearly November, which means that in the UK, the annual Trustees Week is fast approaching. It's a time when the charity sector reflects on the roles of trustees and the impact that nearly 1 million trustees in the UK play in society. Many of the charity represented groups are participating and getting involved in this, so look them up where you can on their websites. I noticed as well this week, the London Marathon reported that it smashed its own world record figure of by raising 87.3 million raised in one single one-day fundraising event. Brilliant news. London Marathon, which is reported to have raised £1.4 billion for good causes since its first race in 1981. Brilliant effort, a super effort by London Marathon. We're going to focus a little bit later on trustees and wider governance, but I wanted to start really, given it's my session, with the upcoming Labour government budget, which has all the markings of being an extremely unpopular one. 26th of November, I think it's due out, so a few weeks away. Chancellor, assuming she's still in post by then, has recently flexed the Labour manifesto promise of no taxes on working people to, quote, keeping taxes on working people as low as possible, unquote. And earlier this month, the Institute for Fiscal Studies estimated that the Chancellor would need to find £22 billion to make up the current government finance shortfall. The following week, the last week, the Office for Budget Responsibilities also cut its expectations for UK productivity growth, which apparently is all down to Brexit. But this is all a backdrop to a report published by investment managers Rathbones, which flags that 70% of charity leaders expect the upcoming budget to hit their charities' finances due to likely further cuts to benefits and taxation rises. Which doesn't paint a very promising picture for the sector. Charles, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think? Is this going to be another kick in the charity sector's guts?
Difficult to tell, isn't it? I mean, the last one with NI and minimum, the minimum wage certainly has hit quite significantly, and I don't think the Treasury really took into account of how much that would impact. The bits in the article I thought were really interesting was nearly half of respondents said that charities' income had fallen by 10% and 15% over the past 2 years. So we know the sector's been squeezed, but actually more alarming was the survey found that 95% of senior charity executives are considering leaving their jobs due to increased strain in recent years. For me, that is, when you go out and talk to people, this is certainly the impression I'm getting out in the sector. And we should be concerned. I think the problem is that this perpetual thing over the last 10 to 15 years where government funding has been cut to charities providing, public services, and charities, for very understandable reasons, have tried to just absorb that by doing more with less. And the problem is, I think we're now getting to a stage where that's having real ramifications on the sector at large.
Yeah, the Rathbones report talks about consumer research with individual donations reducing. If the government the contribution reduces as well again this time round, it's just a downward spiral, isn't it? Catherine, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I picked up the same comment that Charles raised about the 95% of senior charity execs thinking about leaving. The survey was of 100 people, and then there was a bit of a split between whether people thought there was going to be a dramatic increase in those leaving the sector generally in the next 2 years, whereas just slightly more than that said they thought it might increase slightly. But I think it's just concerning, isn't it? I think it's right that it points out that there's pressure here, that there's uncertainty, that doesn't make for a happy working environment. And, I can understand that those that do work in the sector might well be thinking, are there easier, better places that they could be employed rather than being employed here? I was kind of more hopeful of the budget this year that maybe there would be an acknowledgement that the increase to NI and minimum wage had unduly hit the charity sector and hadn't been thought through carefully enough last time round. So I'm hoping the sector isn't going to be pummeled this time round. But I think it's sometimes these creative, ideas that the government comes up with, they just, I don't think, factor in the charity sector at all to even consider what the impact on them could be.
But the problem is if they but also you've got ramifications. So if they're going to hit the perception of the rich and have a go at them to try and raise this money, that will have a knock-on effect to how much people contribute to charity. So I think this is all part and parcel of an issue. But also Charlotte Schofield, if you remember when we were talking about fundraising and her job since COVID, although I suspect actually it's been going on for longer than that, has changed from going out there and doing a fundraising and seem to be recruiting. And people seem to feel that, being in a job for 9 months gives them the experience they need, that they can then move on to another. And you've got this sort of perpetual problem, which is just increasing the cost of running these organizations. So I really worry about this.
It was Hospice UK were in the news talking about the impact that these changes have had on the hospice sector in particular just this week. And there's quite a moving interview with a hospice worker on the BBC, I think, talking about the redundancies, the challenges that hospices have at the moment. And I seem to remember it chimed with me that she said something like, "I can't believe that we're even contemplating, the future, the very future of this hospice, given the work it does." I mean, that's how drastic this has got. The hospice sector is one particular sector I know a little bit more about than others, but it's being replicated across the charity sector, isn't it? It really is very difficult to see a positive way out, really. Continuing on with the theme of charity leaders representing the sector, news this week that a group of charity leaders have banded together to support the Cabinet Office in looking at informed approaches to public service reform. So the Future Governance Forum, which is a government think tank, I believe, launching the Social Insights Panel. A group of charity leaders have got together and are going to be advising one of the government think tanks on this. Charles, is this the first sort of major success of the covenant? People working together between government and sector?
Well, I sort of looked at this and felt, that what they're consulting about is stuff that they should have been consulting about anyway. So I was sort of, I wasn't. I don't know. I was a bit underwhelmed by everything. That you just think that the charity sector has got a whole lot of expertise in particular areas, so mental health, for example. So why wouldn't you have them as part of the conversation when you're formulating policy? And why is this particularly special now, where it should have been going on for years? So I'm sorry. I was just. I mean, if it means that government and the sector and the private sector work more closely together, so we're more joined up and get better policy, big tick in my book. But I have to say I did look at it and just think, really?
The panel is supposed to, or is expected to feed into the Cabinet Office's new program, Test, Learn and Grow program, which apparently it aims to again, quote, decentralized public service reform efforts by working directly with communities to test solutions, unquote. Catherine, is this fill you with enthusiasm?
Well, bless you, James, for your enthusiasm. But I read the Test, Learn and Grow program and laughed and I laughed. And you think, oh my God, it's not enough to just come up with a witty, whizzy title. It needs to actually do something. But I did think the panel is impressive in terms of the panelists on there, the expertise that they've got, their backgrounds, their knowledge, so and the comment being that there's a focus on prevention. So you kind of think, yes, let's get in front of some of these problems, stop throwing money at it after the event. So I think there are positives. Whether the forum will be permitted and empowered to make the changes that need to happen, or whether they'll just be, well, thanks for everything, and we would change that if we could, but it's just too difficult. Who knows? I did think it interesting that one of the panelists, I think, commented on philanthropy having a key role in enabling this kind of structured partnership between civil society, government, and other key decision makers. And I didn't immediately see the connection there of what philanthropy has to play in that. I think that's an option. Not everybody would choose to be philanthropic in that particular direction. So I felt personally that was a bit of a stretch, but I think it will be interesting what the forum comes up with and quite how critical and challenging they are in their observations.
Yeah. Good. We will keep an eye on that as it evolves. Third story, if you like, third story this week comes from, now we haven't read this one before, the People's Gazette of Nigeria. But it concerns a UK charity which has been reprimanded by the Charity Commission over serious financial mismanagement. Notably, and we've covered this sort of matter quite a lot recently, multiple bank accounts which had no trustee control. So it was reported in the UK charity press as well as the Nigerian press. I picked out the Nigerian press because I thought it was a good one to have a look at. But I mean, what caught my eye about particularly about the People's Gazette headline was that they report, again, in quotation marks, the church becomes another Nigerian ministry facing scrutiny over financial related issues abroad, unquote. So obviously this is a series of features that they've highlighted or followed about particularly religious charities overseas, apparently with Nigerian or heads who are struggling to really comply with the local legislation and guidance. There are a number of points in here about governance and control. And the Charity Commission explained that this particular charity's financial issues stemmed from, particularly from its rapid growth in the UK, and it didn't have the good governance and proper financial structures that it should have had. But it was, to an extent, understandable given that so many branches were opening so quickly. But, I mean, Catherine, this is moving into your sphere of charity governance. In a way, I mean, I read it as charity seems to be a little bit of a victim of its own success, albeit, some good guidance in place in the first place would have been useful.
Yeah, I mean, the headline is very attention grabbing, and I had seen comments on it. I think it was on LinkedIn, people saying, I'm a financial specialist and I couldn't cope running 100 bank accounts. So, I think on the face of it, it sounds ridiculous, but actually when you look into it, it's a successful charity that was popping up all over. Different branches were being created. Those branches were opening bank accounts, and it is those accounts that were not compliant, were not under the control of the trustees. The trustees didn't know about them. But that happens, and that happens a lot more often than many people would think when you've got a branch network. So I think, for charities like this, though, it is incredible how quickly they scale up and how they tap into their communities, and people want to donate funds to support the church and its ministry. So, I don't think actually there was any implication at all that there was fraud or mismanagement. It was simply that they weren't, on top of their legal duties in the way that they should be in terms of managing the resources. But, I thought actually it was the scale of it that caught the headline rather than this happens, and if they take the learning point from the Charity Commission and improve their systems, then fine, they're away from here. But I thought it got a lot more coverage than perhaps it needed, purely for the 100 bank accounts, I think, is what people had focused on.
Yeah, I mean, the phrasing is serious financial mismanagement. But then it also says lacked oversight and control over charitable funds. And as you say, Catherine, it comes down to a struggle to control these 100 bank accounts operated by individual branches. So it doesn't quite stack up. It also, I mean, it's the intervention started 6 years ago.
Yeah.
It's taken them 6 years to work out that they didn't have a lot of control over 100 bank accounts. I mean, it doesn't seem right that you should take so long to work through this. Appointed an interim manager in 2019 to work with the trustees to implement essential financial controls. It's another example of, snail's pace rate at which sometimes the Charity Commission can work. Charles.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't looked at what has been released by the Charity Commission, but I think it would have been helpful to have clarified what they mean by serious financial mismanagement. Is that just due to the inadequate oversight and control? As Catherine pointed out, they went from a few branches to 90 branches. I assume these are all in the UK. I mean, I have to say, I take off my hat off to them to actually be able to open 100 bank accounts. I mean, the charity sector seems to be having a nightmare with the banking industry of opening accounts at all. So, I mean, they're obviously doing something right to have done that. But I just sort of slightly, I think it would have been more helpful to have a little bit more clarity around what it was that has actually been the mismanagement, whether it's control or whether there's actually been fraud. And again, it's just,
I don't think there was any suggestion there was fraud. It was the mismanagement and the potential for fraud, I think, is probably the point here.
But
there was
the funds been misused? But have the funds actually been misused for what they're meant for?
I think again, they can't say that it hasn't. I think that's the point. It's the controls over the assets. I mean, we've worked with clients who have this sort of thing, this sort of branch system in place with a lot of accounts. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of time to get the right structure in place. It takes effort. It takes, and trying to do this in a short space of time is going to be hard work. As you say, the most amazing thing, Charles, is they managed to open the things in the first place.
But I think they lose. But the point I'm trying to make is I think they lose from these statements when they talk about serious financial mismanagement. If actually really what their concern is around not having adequate oversight and
you
control.
Say they, you mean the Charity Commission?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the Charity Commission because it's the Charity Commission who have. I mean, this is inverted commas, so it's a statement they have made, and I just think. Again, I mean, Catherine, being a lawyer is very much about being language and being very precise of what you're saying and why, so that it isn't misconstrued or misunderstood. And I just, that to me is what I took away from reading this.
Yeah. Okay. Continuing along the theme of charity governance, the Director of Social Change has issued a short update or report. Is charity governance getting better? I think they're trailing perhaps some more analysis coming out through next year about equality, diversity, and inclusion in particular, but self-assessment of charities scoring themselves on the DSC's assessment of their own governance. The DSC say they collect data from their governance app, and recent findings are that there's a slight improvement in those self-appraisals of the participants, particularly among smaller charities that tend to mark themselves at lower rates than their larger peers. But recently, those smaller charities have become a bit more positive about themselves. So, I mean, it's trailing. It's what seems to be a more extensive report coming out next year, apparently. Catherine, again, with your governance specialist hat on, does this feel familiar to you at the moment?
I thought that was a fascinating comment that they made, that the smaller charities score themselves more harshly than larger charities. And when I'm doing governance reviews, at times I'm trying to encourage clients to say what they're doing is brilliant, that their governance is great. And often you don't know, do you? You don't see what governance is like in another charity. You only see your own. And maybe from time to time, some charities are being too self-critical rather than giving themselves a pat on the back where they deserve it. So I thought that was interesting. And the other point was that the equality and diversity principle is generally the lowest scoring point on the governance app. And that definitely, backs up my experience day to day, is that is the area that most of my clients struggle with the most. I think because it's come in for a start, it's not something they've always been doing, and then knowing where to start, how to map it, how to improve it, how to focus on those areas. So, and in some ways that's a bit of comfort as well, isn't it, to think, oh, it's not just us that's finding that section difficult. There are many charities that are struggling with that, and it takes some more effort.
And the updated governance code that's due out any minute now is expected to focus on that diversity and inclusion piece, isn't it? Because it was, as you say, it wasn't really a focus the last time it was updated.
Yeah. And I suppose there is an argument, isn't there? Is it part of core charity governance? And that might be hugely controversial for some, but is it a nice to have? Is it this is an option, not optional extra in the sense that feel free to ignore people's rights and things. I think just is that at the core of what makes for good governance? But yeah, I just find it interesting. So I don't kind of berate clients under that point to say you're the worst charity in the world because you're not smashing it out of the park on EEDI. I just think there are more core points that I would look at before I would get to that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Finally, we started on a good news story about the London Marathon. We finish on one as well. The latest instalment of the Dormant Asset Scheme could provide 240 million of funding to the charity sector. This all follows some changes to the regulatory rules last year. The FCA's Dormant Asset Scheme Phase 2 expansion is all opened up now. That scheme being operated by the Reclaim Fund, which itself is a not-for-profit body owned by the Treasury, so it's all a bit convoluted. But it has, again, talking about how much it's raised in total, it's distributed more than £1 billion in financial assets to social environmental initiatives since 2011. Charles, it's all good news, isn't it? More money to the sector.
Any money is good news. The thing I would have been quite interested is to understand is, okay, fine, they've distributed more than 1 billion, but what have they actually done with it? It would have been nice to have a bit of an analysis of how this money has been used and what impact it has been, and has it actually been effective? Because that's a significant sum of money. But we will have these dormant assets. There is a risk in case anybody reclaims on it, so there needs to be some sort of safeguarding around that. And I also thought it was quite interesting this is a voluntary thing rather than where I think the insurance companies in particular were put under quite a lot of pressure. If my memory serves me right, this was Gordon Brown when he started this. Of actually getting these assets out and having to give some guarantee. But fundamentally, definitely, if we've got money sitting there doing nothing, we should do something with it. If that means the government needs to underwrite that money in case anybody comes back and reclaim it, so be it. Because actually, I think that's a zero-sum game. But it would just be interesting to know what the impact of the money that has also.
Well, you can look on the Reclaim Fund's website, and there's an awful lot about their impact and what they do, and case studies and stuff like that. So it's all pretty good stuff. Whether there's a full impact assessment done or not, I don't know, but there's definitely stuff on there about the recipients, if you like. Catherine, any final thoughts on that one?
Just it's an incredible amount of money, isn't it? I just think an additional £240 million. You think, wow, just sitting there, not being used for any purpose, presumably not being invested, not generating income from it, amazing. And if we can get that out into the charity and social sector, you think, well, absolutely, we should. But I see it and then think, I bet you that's still the tip of the iceberg isn't it?
Yes.
You know, there will be other massive pots that are untouched, but I suppose at least we're chipping away at it.
Yeah. Okay, that's probably all we've got time for this week. We covered quite a lot of ground there. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Charles. Thank you to you, the listener, for tuning in to this episode of Charity Pulse. We hope we were offering some insight and some inspiration and a bit more understanding of some aspects of this charity social impact world we all participate in. If you've got any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please do let us know. But however you're listening to us, whatever you're doing, we aim to make sure there's something here for you. Don't forget, please follow us, leave us a review, share our podcast with your network, and join us next time as we continue to explore the challenges and opportunities facing our organisations. Thanks very much. Bye-bye for now.